Hello, everybody. Today is December 17th. Is the City of New York and the Correction Department selling out its entire uniformed force? I want to read a couple of things to you. This is an article that was published on May 25th in the New York Sun. And I was interviewed by the reporter, and this is what I stated back in May. I would argue hiring civilians as chiefs would be a violation of the city code. I think it's just a matter of time before they start hiring civilians to replace wardens. As far as removing the chiefs and filling them with civilians, I'm opposed. Now here I'd like to read for you a couple of sentences, and bear with me. This is a letter written by the federal monitor and his team to the United States District Court Judge. And this letter is dated November 14th, 2022. Number one, the city has advised that it intends to adopt the monitoring team's recommendation to expand eligibility criteria for warden positions to allow the city to hire from outside the current uniform ranks. So apparently, the city wants to civilianize the uniform force. Number two, the SDNY, Southern District of New York, has advised that it will consent to defendants' request to seek a court order permitting the department to hire warden supervisory staff from outside the current uniform ranks. The government has strongly encouraged the city to take this step since the monitor first made this recommendation in May of 2021. So this is according to this is the defendant's request. Now the defendant is the City of New York and the Correction Department. So it appears like the city and the department is requesting to seek a court order to permit the department to hire outside of the uniform ranks. And that's because the Administrative Code Section 9 specifically states that wardens are to be hired from within the uniform ranks. So this court order would circumvent any violation to the Administrative Code. Number three, indeed, the issue was a focus of the court conference last December. In numerous submissions to the court, the monitor has repeatedly attributed the ongoing non-compliance with the consent judgment to the inadequate supervision of line-level uniform staff provided by those who hold facility leadership positions. So he's blaming the non-compliance of the consent judgment, the Nunez consent decrees, on uniform staff, as we discussed before. Now, I have said before, and I'll say it again, he's scapegoating uniform staff, he's rebuking uniform staff, and he's gaslighting uniform staff. So he wants the public and the judge to think that this is all the fault of uniform staff, which we know it's not. It's the fault of the failed policies of the past 9 years. Number four, it is unfortunate that the city has waited this long to seek this relief, which makes it possible to look beyond the limited pool of candidates within the department to find the most qualified and experienced correction professionals to oversee the day-to-day operations of the jails. The government hopes that the department recruits and hires wardens who are committed to dismantling the culture of dysfunction and violence that has permeated this system for decades and are willing to embrace and operationalize the reforms required by the consent judgment and other court orders, in this case, so that real change will occur. So, he wants the most qualified. That's a slap in the face to the entire uniformed force of the Correction Department, because he doesn't want the most qualified. He wants the most politically beneficial to him. Also, this culture of dysfunction and violence, this is a culture that Steve Martin helped create. But yet he wants to gaslight the department uniform force to make it think that it's our fault. Lastly, when he talks about real change, he is delusional, because these so-called reformers, they have done nothing but deform the department for 9 years. Number 5, and this is the last one. The SDNY, Southern District of New York, has advised that beyond the issue related to the appointment of facility wardens, it continues to have concerns about whether the department has a sufficient pool of qualified uniformed staff to fill other vacancy leadership positions, including the positions of captain, deputy warden, and assistant deputy warden. The government urges the city to consider seeking additional court relief that would allow, where necessary, to fill second-tier facility leadership positions with qualified individuals outside the current department ranks. Given the dire conditions in the jails, the city must take whatever actions are needed to be able to recruit the best and most competent individuals to supervise and support correction officers in the jails. So, this is union busting. They're telling us that they are going to eventually civilianize deputy wardens, assistant deputy wardens, and captains. This is in direct violation of the spirit of the National Labor Relations Act from 1935, which was passed by the federal government at that time to ensure that unions and management had collective bargaining to discuss their issues. Apparently, this is not the case. So that was in the letter November 14th, written by the federal monitor to the judge. DOC right now is still navigating its Titanic right into the iceberg, following the navigational path that Bill de Blasio has taken for 8 years of his administration. Prior to Bill de Blasio, the New York City Correction Department was the premier agency in the country. Premier. Now, it's not the premier, and it might be the worst. Now, as after what I just read to you, New York City doesn't even want New York City. This summer, 2 chiefs retired, and they were replaced by civilian deputy commissioners. Now, it's been about 6 months now. Has there been any improvement? I would say no. The deaths of incarcerated individuals continue. The overdoses continue. The violence probably has gone up. The crime for sure has gone up. The inmate crime has gone up. And the gangs are still in control of the jails. So where is the improvement there? Now they want to replace the wardens. And as I mentioned, inevitably, they'll probably try to replace deputy wardens, assistant deputy wardens, and captains. So they want to replace wardens now. 8,000 members of the uniformed force. Are they saying that they can't find 2 or 3 people to rise through the ranks to become chiefs and 4 or 5 people to rise through the ranks to become wardens out of a workforce of 8,000? That is a slap in the face to the entire agency. So their solution is to hire civilians. Now, I am 100% opposed to that because that will not solve anything. Once again, they have to change these failed policies that are counterproductive to safety and inconsistent with the effective management of the jails if they want to get anything accomplished and have any success. But no, they want to hire civilians from outside the agency because they claim that they will get the best candidates and the most qualified people. And like I mentioned, they're not getting the best candidates. They'll get their best friends. And they're not getting the most qualified. They'll get the most politically beneficial to them. So basically what they're going to do is they're going to be hiring mercenaries that'll come here and implement the same failed policies of the last 9 years without any pushback or any questioning of these policies that have left thousands of correction officers severely injured and that have left also non-uniformed employees injured, doctors, maintenance people, and also that have left thousands of inmates disfigured with scars from slashings and stabbings. Would the city ever even think of replacing New York City police captains, police lieutenants, or police sergeants with civilians? And further, would the community ever accept that? I don't want a civilian police sergeant in my community, or lieutenant or captain, but I don't think the city would ever do that. They're doing that to correction. And why are they doing that to correction? Well, I suspect that, number one, they want to appease Steve Martin. Number two, they want to avoid a receivership. Now, I oppose a federal receivership, but not at this cost, not at destroying the unions, and not at destroying the entire uniform force of the department. And most importantly, I oppose it because it will not solve the problem. This is just a distraction to avoid them discussing the real problem, which is their inability to manage these jails, which is their policies that have not reformed but deformed the department. They don't want to talk about that. They want to talk about that it's the fault of the uniform staff. This will not solve the problem, but we know what it will do? It will cause a tsunami of nepotism in the correction department. It will cause a huge amount of political favors in filling these jobs when they civilianize the wardens and potentially deputy wardens and assistant deputy wardens and captains. You know, sometimes I wonder, who is the commissioner? Is it Louis Molina or is it Steve Martin? Now, I voted for Eric Adams, and I support Eric Adams, and I support Louis Molina, but not on this issue. This is union busting. This is a disrespect and a slap in the face to a workforce that is dedicated and qualified to do this job. They are blaming the uniform force for their mistakes and their failures. I suggest that Louis Molina stop listening to Steve Martin, because Steve Martin is navigating that Titanic right into the iceberg. And will that be Louis Molina's legacy? Now, when the department hits the iceberg, it doesn't matter what seat you have, because the iceberg is going to destroy everything. This is a profiles in courage moment for Louis Molina. And I ask him, are you going to do what's best for the correction department, for the incarcerated persons, for the correction officers, for the non-uniform staff? Or are you going to do what's best for you and Steve Martin?